Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe on your way in. And if you're not new here, hi, how are you? Welcome back. It's good to see all of you here. I am looking forward to diving into today's video, but as you know, we're gonna start with a little disclaimer. And of course, as always, I do need to read these notes just to make sure I don't miss a beat or skip a beat. Warning, we will be discussing seizures, details relating to physical convulsions, severe medical health issues in regards to the respiratory system, drug usage, and illegal lethal doses of drugs and poison. If you are sensitive to any of the following, I do recommend that you click on my more lighthearted videos that are not necessarily focused on crime time videos. And without further ado, let's get into it. In 1982, 7 people in Chicago died after taking Tylenol laced with cyanide. The killer was never caught and still has never been caught to this very day. This case changed pharmaceutical packaging forever and remains one of America's most notorious unsolved crimes. It was September in Chicago. The leaves were turning and families were settling into their autumn routines. No one could have predicted the terror that was about to unfold. This story starts with our first victim, Mary Kellerman. She was born on March 9th, 1970, and she was the only child to Dennis and Gianna, I believe I'm saying that correctly, Gianna Kellerman, who doted on her. Mary was described as a bright and inquisitive 7th grader attending Jane Addams Junior High School in Schaumburg, Illinois. She enjoyed a variety of activities such as making pottery, cooking with her mother, taking guitar lessons, practicing gymnastics, riding her pony, and playing Atari with her father. Mary was known for her warm and loving personality. Her childhood best friend, Sharon Hogg, described her as a happy-go-lucky gal, a person with a constant smile. In the final year of her life, Mary began babysitting and used the money she earned to buy gifts for her small parents and books to further educate herself. On September 28th at 4 p.m. while on a shopping trip at the jewel store in Elk Grove Village, Mary's mother purchased a bottle of extra-strength Tylenol amongst other items while on their shopping trip. The next morning at 6:15 a.m. on September 29th, the next day, that same bottle of Tylenol was used when Mary expressed symptoms of a cold to her mother. Mary had woken up with a sore throat and took a Tylenol after conversing with her mother to ease her discomfort. Shortly after taking the capsule, given the time of day, I'm going to make the assumption that it was time to crawl back into bed and relax. However, other events began to unfold. Mary had collapsed in the bathroom. There was a loud, suspicious thud that her father had heard from across the room or even the house, given how at this hour it was most likely silent. It was very easy for him to hear something going on in Mary's vicinity within her bedroom. Her father found her unconscious on the bathroom floor with shallow breathing and fixed, dilated eyes, which is usually a sign of physical distress. Despite being rushed to the Alexan Brothers Medical Center, efforts to save her life, including CPR and installing a pacemaker, was unsuccessful. Mary was pronounced dead at 9:56 a.m. on September 29th, 1982. Medical professionals had initially believed that Mary suffered from a stroke, even though she was fairly healthy for her age and was also a very young girl. And the possibility of a stroke happening at her age was rare. Given these circumstances, and the fact that her death pretty much was a mystery, an autopsy was ordered on her body. Usually autopsies, as I understand, are in someone's death are completed. They are taken into consideration, but I believe given the rarity of her death and how out of place it seemed for medical professionals, they especially wanted an autopsy for Mary. Mary's death and sudden passing had a profound impact on her community, and it caused such widespread panic and fear. The community was shocked by the randomness and brutality of her death, as Mary was a healthy, well-loved 7th grader whose life was tragically cut short, especially by circumstances unknown. Mary's passing would later on mark the beginning of the Tylenol Murders as the first victim. Her parents Dennis and Gianna grieved the loss of their only child in a private manner and spoke on how they hoped the person responsible would eventually be held accountable, especially given that her death would be deemed a murder later on. Before I proceed, I did want to share, there are many people we're going to describe here. Again, there's a total of 7 victims that we're going to be going through here, that we're going to be touching on and their experience. But overall, the symptoms, how they came to die are all the same, but I wanted to give some insight on the victim's experience from their perspective, especially given that these individuals did not live to share their experience and how their final moments were. If that makes sense, just to give some weight and gravity to the situation here. As the victims of cyanide poisoning began to succumb to the effects of the toxin, their final moments were likely filled with a harrowing mixture of confusion, fear, and physical distress. Initially, they may have experienced a sudden onset of symptoms, perhaps a sharp headache and a wave of dizziness that left them disoriented. The bitter almond odor of cyanide, if they could detect it, might have added an unsettling layer to their growing unease. Within minutes, their bodies would have reacted violently to the poison. Nausea surged through them, accompanied by a profound weakness that made even the simplest movements feel insurmountable. Breathing became labored. They may have gasped for air as their lungs struggled to function properly. The heart raced in desperation, an attempt to deliver oxygen to cells that were increasingly starved for it. Are you fucking serious? Confusion would set in as their cognitive functions began to falter, leaving them unable to comprehend what was happening. As the poison continued its relentless assault on their systems, the victims might have experienced a chilling sense of impending doom. Seizures could erupt without warning, causing involuntary convulsions that further robbed them of control over their bodies. In these moments, panic could take hold, an instinctual fight against the suffocating grip of cyanide as consciousness slipped away. Eventually, as cellular respiration ceased and vital organs began to fail, they would face the terrifying prospect of losing consciousness. The world around them might blur into darkness, punctuated by fleeting moments of clarity where they realized something was profoundly wrong. If they were still aware at this stage, they might feel an overwhelming sense of helplessness as their bodies succumbed to the poison's effects. In those final moments before slipping into oblivion, some victims may have experienced a brief sense of peace or acceptance as the body shut down, an eerie calm amidst the chaos. Ultimately, death would come swiftly for many, often within minutes after exposure, marking a tragic end to lives that were abruptly cut short by a silent and insidious killer. That's just to paint a picture of what these individuals were experiencing. Sure, as again we go through each victim, I will be describing what it is that witnesses had basically witnessed as they were succumbing to the poison, but from their experience, this is just an assumption ultimately, right? A guess as to what they could be feeling based off what we know from studies, from science, from the general understanding of what cyanide can do to the human body. However, we will never ever, hopefully, understand or experience what it is that they did in their final moments after taking these Tylenol pills. Born on March 7th, 1955 in Tarnow, Poland, Adam Janis immigrated to the United States with his family when he was 8 years old. Raised on a small farm in southern Poland, his family moved to Chicago's northwest side after his father refused to join the Communist Party. Adam and his wife Teresa, not to get confused, there's 2 Teresas in this story. This Teresa is Adam's wife, spelled Teresa. His sister-in-law, Teresa Janis, who's married to his younger brother Stanley, Teresa's husband. So Teresa, spelled with a TH, goes by Terry, thankfully, because this was gonna get confusing. Adam and his wife Teresa owned a tidy brick bungalow in Arlington Heights where they lived with their 2 young children, Kathy and Thomas. Adam is described as a loving father who enjoyed playing with his children and tinkering with clocks in his spare time. Teresa, his wife, would describe him as always happy, content with both his job as a postal supervisor and his family life. On September 29th at 11 a.m., after dropping his children off at school, Adam had felt the symptoms of a cold coming on and decided that for safe measures, he would stop by the Jewel store in Arlington Heights and buy a 50-count bottle of extra-strength Tylenol capsules. I'm gonna have to look into what a Jewel store is. I believe it was just some sort of chain or franchise of like drugstores or maybe little market stores out there in Chicago. I can give further clarification on that, but I'm gonna let future Tyler edit that in if it's necessary, because I just want to keep going with the story here. Hey guys, future Tyler here. While editing, I actually wanted to let you know, fun fact, Jewel Osco has 188 locations still standing today and became a subsidiary of Albertsons in 1999. Jewel Osco's origins trace back to 1899 when it began as a door-to-door coffee delivery service known as the Jewel Tea Company. Over time, it evolved into a supermarket chain with layouts similar to Vaughn's and Albertsons. This transformation allowed Jewel Osco to expand its offerings and become a staple in the Chicago area. Okay, that was it. Adam then returned home before his shift started and decided that the symptoms he was experiencing from his evolving cold were only growing stronger, so why not take some Tylenol to ease the discomfort? Suddenly, after taking the Tylenol capsules, Adam emerged from the bathroom clutching his chest and complained of pain to his wife. Adam's wife, Teresa, understood quickly that she was not capable of assisting her husband given the pain that he was describing. Teresa had taken action and quickly sought help from neighbors. One neighbor in particular was Diane O'Sullivan, a registered nurse who spoke Polish. Teresa ran to her for assistance, and Diane quickly rushed inside the Janis home and attempted to resuscitate Adam by performing CPR. Adam was showing signs of resuscitating oxygen, however, his breathing was extremely shallow. Although Teresa and Diane moved as fast as humanly possible, in the time it had taken for Teresa to flag down help and return, her husband was already dead by the time they were back in the house attempting CPR. Although this was really unknown to Diane and Teresa at the time, Adam was found on the floor outside the bathroom by his wife initially before she flagged down help, with fixed, dilated eyes, again signaling that the body was under severe distress and shallow breathing. At 2:33 p.m., Adam was transported by an ambulance to the Northwest Community Hospital, and at 3:15, Adam was officially pronounced dead at the age of 27 years old. Now, forgive me, this is where the details get a little mixed up. I did my best to piece this together myself, but from my understanding, after Adam had been taken to the hospital, relatives of the Janis family, including his younger brother Stanley and his wife Teresa, had gone to Adam's house to support and grieve as a family with his wife Teresa. The news of Adam's passing had, of course, heavily affected the family, but given that it was so quick and just so traumatic, I think made this 10 times harder for the Janis family. It wasn't a peaceful passing. Adam had suffered minutes prior to his untimely death. While the Janis family are at the house, again, I'm not I don't have the details of like who specifically, but we do know Stanley, Adam's younger brother, was there with his wife Teresa, and Adam's wife Teresa. To recap, Stanley Janis is Adam's younger brother. He's the husband to Teresa Terry Janis, not to again be confused with Adam's wife Teresa. Adam's wife Teresa had called relatives and family to inform them of Adam's collapse and the fact that he was rushed away to the hospital for further medical assistance before he had been pronounced dead. After learning that Adam was taken to the hospital and had been pronounced dead, in the same evening on September 30th, Stanley and his wife Teresa had gone into his brother's house in order to support Adam's wife given the stress of the situation. Stanley had located the Tylenol bottle in the bathroom or within that vicinity where Adam had taken the capsules before collapsing. At 5:40 p.m., Terry had taken some of the Tylenol to most likely cope with the stress of the situation, and at 6:30 p.m., Stanley did the same. Shortly after taking the pills from the same bottle as Adam, both Stanley and Terry became horribly ill. They began vocalizing out loud as Adam did the pain that they were experiencing, and it got to the point where Teresa, Adam's wife, was starting to witness The same reaction from both Stanley and Terry as she did her own husband. Immediately, the authorities, the paramedics, were again contacted for medical assistance. Within minutes, the ambulance was back at the Janus house, now taking Stanley and Terry on the gurneys into the ambulance and to the hospital as fast as possible. Now, it doesn't specify who called the paramedics and again, who was there at the time of Stanley and Teresa's demise after taking the Tylenol capsules. What we do know and what can be safely assumed is that, again, Teresa, Adam's wife, was there, maybe other relatives that have not been clarified or announced. But can you imagine watching your family drop dead, quite frankly, left and right, in front of you within the same day, after witnessing your husband fall, like basically go through the same motions? I cannot imagine how Teresa, Adam's wife, must have felt and how other relatives must have felt learning this, possibly witnessing this as well for themselves. I mean, my heart is heavy. Can you only imagine? From the times ranging from 6:30 p.m. to 8:15 p.m., both Stanley and Terry are rushed to the Northwest Community Hospital, the same hospital that Adam was taken to before he was pronounced dead. Stanley is later pronounced dead, while Terry is placed on life support by medical professionals in an attempt to save her life and support her vital organs, which were rapidly failing. At this point in time, this is where I would like to introduce Helen Jensen. Helen Jensen, a public nurse in Arlington Heights, had been called to the scene by one of the firefighters who had arrived along with the paramedics at the Janus house.
The Janus killings were the key to finding all 7 deaths were caused by tainted Tylenol. Chuck Kramer was part of a team that quickly made that heroic discovery.
It brings back a lot of memories.
Meet retired nurse Helen Jensen. She's also one of those heroes. She worked the Janus case along with Kramer. Both suspected there was something deadly inside the Tylenol.
I got a phone call from the fire department, from Chuck Kramer.
They compared notes from all 3 Janus deaths. And then Nurse Jensen sounded the alarm at the hospital where Adam, Stanley, and Teresa all died.
I went back to the emergency room, presented it to the medical examiner and the police, and they laughed at me.
She was already saying, it's got to be Tylenol. The 3 people took Tylenol. And they weren't believing her at that point.
I stamped my feet. I was angry. No, I really did. I reiterated it has to be, and this is why it has to be. And I can get very adamant. But they did not believe me.
To prove her theory, she actually went over to the Janus home to search for the original bottle of Tylenol. Each of the Januses had taken 2 capsules before they died.
And I went into the bathroom and found a bottle of Tylenol. And I brought it out to the kitchen with one of the police officers. I opened it and counted the pills. And there were 6 pills missing and there were 3 people dead. And I said, it has to be the Tylenol.
Then she kept searching the home for any other kind of clues.
I also went through the garbage and found the receipt that this had been purchased at Jewel that morning. I'm holding it, the bottle, and the receipt. And I laid it out in front of the medical examiner, and I counted it again and told him the same thing. There are 6 capsules missing. There are 3 people dead. There has to be a correlation. Oh, no, that's fine. The Tylenol's fine.
Helen is quoted saying to CBS that she recalls pleading with the authorities at the time to take her insight seriously, only to be waved off and dismissed. Helen's claims were pretty solid in my opinion. I mean, this is the 80s, and unfortunately, this is not the first time we see police or the proper authorities responsible so reluctant to do their job. I have covered only so few crime time videos, but even within the short amount that I've done, we have at least 1 or 2, if not multiple individuals within a single crime time case where they were supposed to fulfill specific responsibilities, meet certain standards, but could give 2 shits to do so. honestly. Get a different job. There was no harm in taking her information into account, even if it was taken lightly, but to all just, you know what I mean? Like, to take it in just even a little bit is one thing, but to completely rule out the possibility is silly, especially since the doctor assisting the Janus family was also extremely puzzled as to how they were experiencing these specific symptoms, which were not the symptoms of typical acetaminophen poisoning. Probably butchering that word. It's okay. Speaking of the doctor that was treating the Janus family, this is where Dr. Thomas Kim comes into play here. Dr. Kim was the physician treating the Janus family upon admission to the Northwest Hospital. At the time, he served as the chief of critical care at the Northwest Community Hospital. When the Janus family was brought to the hospital after collapsing, Dr. Kim was informed of their symptoms and initially suspected a case of acetaminophen poisoning, also known as acetaminophen overdose, occurs when an individual consumes too much of this common over-the-counter pain reliever and fever reducer. Acetaminophen is often used to alleviate mild to moderate pain, including headaches, backaches, toothaches, menstrual cramps, arthritis pain, and cold or flu symptoms. Common products containing acetaminophen include Excedrin, Midol, NyQuil, Dayquil, Robitussin, Benadryl, and Tylenol itself. Overdosing on acetaminophen can result from exceeding the maximum daily dosage, accidentally taking multiple medications containing it, or intentionally overdosing. Symptoms can vary, but typically manifest within the first 24 hours as nausea, vomiting, stomach pain, loss of appetite, paleness, fatigue, and sweating. After 24 to 72 hours, more severe symptoms may develop, such as upper right abdominal pain, dark urine, decreased urination, and jaundice, yellowing of the skin and eyes. In extreme cases, within 72 to 96 hours, individuals may experience blood in their urine, difficulty breathing, confusion, or even a coma. Severe acetaminophen poisoning can lead to liver damage and potentially can result in liver failure and death. It's crucial to acknowledge mental health issues surrounding substance abuse and substance use. I've heard of individuals attempting suicide using acetaminophen products. A friend once shared with me that it was one of the most painful experiences of their life. If you or someone you know is struggling with suicidal thoughts or mental health challenges, please reach out for help. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is available at 1-800-273-TALK. Again, that is 1-800-273-8255 for confidential support. As more victims arrived at the hospital with similar symptoms, Dr. Kim grew increasingly frustrated and desperate to determine the cause of their ailments. He quickly realized that this was not a typical case of acetaminophen poisoning. Something far more sinister was at play. Dr. Kim took nurse Helen Jensen's observations regarding the Tylenol bottle seriously when she approached him shortly after her own attempts to alert the police about her findings. Driven by urgency and concern for the Janus family's well-being, he conducted a thorough examination of their symptoms and recognized that they pointed to an unusual cause: cyanide poisoning. Cyanide poisoning is rare and typically not encountered in Dr. Kim's practice. For a moment, he doubted whether it could be cyanide or not. He doubted whether it could be the culprit. However, trusting his instincts and the evidence before him, he ordered tests for cyanide at an external lab in Highland Park. The situation highlighted how uncommon such an occurrence was for a small Illinois town. Even the lab technician reported having never run a cyanide test before, despite being equipped to do so. Dr. Kim faced potential skepticism from colleagues who might view his suspicions as unfounded or foolish, yet he expressed the feeling that his back was against the wall and had nothing else to offer in terms of solutions for his patient's conditions, making this a desperate measure rather than a standard procedure. Fortunately, he followed his intuition, and at 1:30 a.m. on September 30th, Dr. Kim received a phone call from the lab confirming that massive amounts of cyanide were present in each victims' blood samples. This revelation prompted him to inform law enforcement and relevant authorities that the cause of death was linked to the Tylenol capsules consumed by the Janus family. This grim discovery confirmed the worst fears. Someone had tampered with the Tylenol bottles and laced them with high concentrations of cyanide, an insidious act that would lead to widespread panic and tragedy within the community. Mary Lynn Reiner was a 27-year-old woman who lived in Winfield, Illinois, with her husband, Ed Reiner. She was one of 8 children raised by Howard and Catherine Farron in Villa Park. Lynn was known for her warm personality and devotion to her family. She was a loving mother to her children, who were ages 9, 22 months, and just 7 days old at the time of her death. Lynn was described as a great cook who enjoyed preparing meals like corned beef and egg noodles for her family. Lynn also had a love for playing softball, the drums, and bowling. On September 29th, Lynn had recently given birth to her 4th child only 7 days prior to September 29th, and she was naturally experiencing postpartum discomfort, which prompted Lynn to purchase a 50-count bottle of extra-strength Tylenol from Walgreens. At 3:30 p.m., Lynn was at home with her newborn baby and began feeling unwell. Shortly after taking the Tylenol, Lynn would collapse and begin showing signs of distress. Convulsions, seizures began to erupt. Her husband, Ed Reiner, had arrived home to find Lynn in this state and immediately called for paramedics. Upon arrival, Lynn was immediately taken on a gurney and was taken to Central DuPage Hospital by 5 p.m. There are no specifications or in-depth details in regards to Lynn and how it came to life support when she arrived at the hospital. Medical professionals thought it best to put her on life support, and given the reason someone would be initially placed on life support, we can safely assume that the reason she was put on life support was because that her organs were drastically failing. Her heart was racing and compensating, working harder than it should be naturally in order to deliver oxygen to her failing organs, one of them being her lungs, right? Life support can also be used for other things like mechanical ventilation, again, because her heart was racing, her lungs were failing, and her heart was failing to keep her lungs afloat, right? And her heart was also failing due to the stress and being overworked in order to properly supply her body with oxygen. The next morning, on September 30th at 9:03 a.m., Lynn was removed from life support after being monitored very closely. Within the time she was admitted up until 9:03 a.m., medical professionals, nurses alike, physicians, they didn't see a change in her condition. Usually life support, I don't know, it's a means to keep someone alive if they're in a coma and they're not really responsive to begin with, but their body's responding to the life support, which is usually a good sign. That means there's a chance of survival, right? Sometimes people, that's what I'm getting at. People are put on life support for a chance of survival, and that maybe their body just needs resuscitation, and life support, it provides a continuous flow of resuscitation, oxygen, medication, IVs, whatever the person may need. But unfortunately, there was no change in her condition even after putting her on life support and attempting everything they possibly could with the life support. And so Lynn was removed from life support and officially pronounced dead at 9:05 a.m. after giving her 2 minutes to see if her body would respond in any way after taking her off life support. And unfortunately, she did not. Let me tell you about our next victim here, who is about Mary McFarland, who was the 6th victim in this tragic series of events. She was 31 years old and worked at Illinois Bell, a major telecommunications company that provided telephone services throughout the state of Illinois. The company, which had a significant presence in the Chicago area, was known for innovations like call waiting and three-way calling. On September 29th, 1982, Mary was at her job in Lombard when she began to experience a severe headache. The flickering fluorescent lights and the stress from dealing with demanding customers likely contributed to her discomfort, as she would report to her colleagues. Like when she had passed, her colleagues were interviewed by police because, again, throughout this entire tragic series of events, the authorities have been doing their due diligence and making sure that every single victim, which was a lead into the possible perpetrator as to who may have done this to these individuals, was sought after and looked into, and they would talk to every single person they could possibly get their hands on, just to ensure that there wasn't any ill will, that this wasn't a case of like someone trying to have, revenge because of a personal vendetta, things like that. So her colleagues would go on to say that their job can be quite stressful. Mary was having a really bad headache. It was suggested to her maybe that she take some pain medications, and how the job is stressful is she actually offered Tylenol, the same bottle she had taken her capsules from, to another colleague or two, and they had actually declined because they had already taken medication provided by the company called Greenies. And this was the same concept. The Greenies were a fever reducer, pain reliever, but it was provided by the company because people were literally there stressed out about their jobs, and anything related to the triggers of stress were nothing abnormal in this office. So they provided something called Greenies to their employees to help alleviate any discomfort that they were feeling. I just thought that was very interesting. I've never heard of that. In fact, nowadays, being a GM for 3 fucking years, you're not supposed to actually hand out ibuprofen to your employees or members alike. So I don't know how, this was the 80s. Let me just stop right there. Sorry, that's enough right there. That says enough in itself. This situation alone had to happen for things to change in regards to packaging edibles or medication. You get vitamins from a store, it's got a sealant on it. We'll get more into that later. To alleviate her pain, Mary decided to take some extra strength Tylenol from a bottle that had been purchased by a family member just the day before, on September 28th. Mary took the Tylenol while on her shift, stepping into a break room to find some relief. After taking the Tylenol, Mary returned to her duties on the store floor, but soon felt unwell again. This time it wasn't because the Tylenol didn't work. In fact, it was because these capsules were laced with cyanide. Not long after, Mary collapsed in the break room. Her coworkers quickly called for emergency assistance, and paramedics arrived just 2 minutes later. Despite their efforts to revive her, Mary was transported to Good Samaritan Hospital in Downers Grove. Tragically, Mary never regained consciousness and was pronounced dead at 3:18 a.m. on September 30th. Attempts to save her included life support, CPR, and very close monitoring to ensure that her body was reciprocating the medical treatment that was being performed on her. The following day, an autopsy was performed on Mary's body. It revealed that Mary had died from acute cyanide intoxication. This shocking discovery prompted police to investigate further. They found the Tylenol bottle among her medications and learned from her father that she had taken the pills shortly before collapsing. As authorities connected Mary's death with the others who had also taken the Tylenol around the same time frame, it became clear that something sinister was happening. The investigation into these deaths would soon reveal a disturbing pattern that would lead to widespread panic and significant changes in consumer safety regulations across the country. Within a span of just 48 hours, 5 individuals lost their lives under suspicious circumstances, exhibiting similar symptoms. Autopsies were conducted on all victims, a necessary step given the unusual nature of their deaths. To recap, these victims were generally healthy for their age and stature, yet they succumbed to health complications that would be rare for individuals of their profile. The Cook County Medical Examiner's Office performed the autopsies and identified cyanide as the cause of death in several, if not all, of the cases. The investigation into the Tylenol poisoning began when authorities authorities discovered that the Tylenol bottles confiscated from the victims emitted a distinct bitter almond smell, a telltale sign of cyanide presence. Dr. Edmund Donahue, the deputy chief medical examiner, had immediately requested cyanide testing for the Janus victims. The results confirmed high levels of cyanide in their bloodstreams. Following this alarming revelation, Dr. Kim contacted law enforcement to inform them of the findings. Given the rapid onset of illness and death among the victims, it became evident to police that they were dealing with a serious public health crisis. This critical phone call occurred at 1 a.m. on September 30th, leaving officials with a full day to mobilize their response. Because again, Dr. Kim was called around 1 a.m. in the morning, 1:15, immediately contacted the authorities right after that conversation had concluded. By early morning on September 30th, investigators connected the deaths to Tylenol. Thanks to Dr. Kim's prompt action and the medical examiner's thorough testing of blood samples, at 10 a.m., Edmund Donahue held a press conference announcing that the deaths were linked to tainted Tylenol capsules. Authorities specifically identified control number MC2880 and urged anyone with that number on their Tylenol bottle to return it to the police immediately. They also advised anyone who had purchased Tylenol products or those Tylenol capsules in general in recent days to refrain from using it until further notice. News of this situation spread rapidly, reaching Johnson & Johnson, the company responsible for the Tylenol products at this point in time, and still to this day. They were the sole manufacturer of Tylenol products. You may know Johnson & Johnson as their classic profile when it comes to baby products and in general, their commercials. Johnson & Johnson is known to be a very prominent figure and have reigned a very long time over a course of decades at this point. And the reason why they've been so successful and so prominent even after this event is because of the money, time, effort, and dedication they've poured into their brand. I mean, first of all, the reason why they're so successful as a brand is due to the fact that they have taken it upon themselves to endorse specific celebrities, to do their advertisements for them. They've poured in a lot of money into their advertisements in general just to ensure that they reach the right audiences, to promote their products, to gain more sales. And they honestly were super successful to the point where they owned 37% of the pie chart when it came to the market, meaning 37% out of all businesses, companies, facilities, brands that were out there during this time, this point in time, they were 37% of it. That is a major chunk of the pie, even in this domain. I mean, I know that may not seem like a lot to us, but it's a lot in their world. They also handled, and we'll get into this in a second, but they also handled this situation perfectly. Known for their classic offerings like baby oil and powder, Johnson & Johnson felt an urgent need to manage this crisis effectively. By that afternoon, they initiated a recall of Tylenol bottles bearing control number MC2880. In general, Johnson & Johnson took it upon themselves to recall all Tylenol products on the shelves nationwide, recalling a total of 31 million Tylenol products, if not those specific Tylenol bottles. Later that evening, on the same day, Illinois Attorney General Ty Farner assembled a task force dedicated to investigating these tragic events, ensuring that all available resources were focused on identifying the perpetrator behind these killings. Before September 30th concluded, Chicago Mayor Jane Byrne announced a citywide ban on all Tylenol products to safeguard public health. On October 1st, 1982 at 1:15 p.m., Teresa Janus, the wife of Stanley Janus, who was put on life support and had been fighting for her life since she collapsed, was pronounced dead due to complications from the cyanide poisoning within the Tylenol at 1:15 p.m. On the same day, Paula Prince, a 35-year-old flight attendant for United Airlines, became the 7th victim of this tragic series of events. She was found dead in her Chicago condominium after consuming Tylenol purchased from a Walgreens on September 29th. And just in case I didn't take the time to already elaborate, in the 80s you wouldn't think so, but that was the time that Walgreens had started implementing pharmacies within their stores just so that they could make it more easily accessible for people to get their prescriptions filled and picked up, and so people could have easier access to over-the-counter medication. It wasn't like new or not heard of, but people were starting to branch out from having their doctor prescribe things to them and having to go strictly to the doctor just to get medication for certain things. This was a time where people could skip the doctors, skip right over that, and go straight to the liquor store down the street or the Walgreens or the Jewel store and pick up something to alleviate their pain or their discomfort right then and there. It was not only feeding into instant gratification, which we see a lot nowadays with Amazon, eBay, things of that sort, those certain services, but it also, again, saved people money. You know, when we think about going to the doctors, even if it's just a checkup, you still have to pay for that. Even depending on the insurance you have, you're still paying out of pocket sometimes, or maybe it's just not all worth, you know, trying to schedule an appointment and wait for the day that you have to go see the doctor and be in pain or dealing with whatever it is that you're waiting to see the doctor for. Back then, people were starting to realize, and Johnson & Johnson was actually they actually can help me confirm this. There was companies like them that were putting out advertisements and spreading the word and having representatives go around to hospitals, businesses, clinics, and talking about how people can now just pick up products at the store and not have to go to the doctors, and that if it's okay, even if you don't go to the doctors, did you know that, you know, physicians who have children use Tylenol, and like that whole line, like if hospitals use Tylenol, then you should too. It's like basically pointing out that even if you're not going to like a certified medical professional, this is still safe. You can buy this and be completely fine. It'll help you with whatever ailments you're dealing with, right? This was a time where Walgreens had clinics integrated into them. People could just go and pick this stuff up. As you see today at Target, not only stores have integrated clinics, but the clinics is basically where the medication is, where like the medication aisle is the vitamins, what have you. So like people would just go in, stop by, grab what they need, get their prescription, go home. It was completely normal. Paula Prince was known for her vibrant personality and adventurous spirit. Born on November 21st, 1946 in Nebraska, she was the youngest of 4 children in the Prince family. Long story short, because this is not about my camera at the end of the fucking day, but it overheats a lot and the battery exhausts and just like, it's just a whole fucking thing. So we're continuing on my phone because I'm really not going to let that fucking crusty bitch hold me up from getting this video out. Another thing too is like coincidentally, let me grab it, been having the shittiest fucking headache because I don't drink enough water. I'll just be honest and call myself out. I don't drink enough water. I'm like dehydrated. I'm dealing with like exhaustion. I guess I don't know if you could classify it as heat exhaustion, but I coincidentally needed to take some acetaminophen, even fucking staring it in the face, I can't properly say it right. Being here, kind of reflecting, like thinking about how, take these things not so carelessly, but without any thought, because we should be able to trust the things that we're putting into our body, but quite frankly, even today, we really can't. Paula had built a successful career as a flight attendant and was recognized for her striking beauty and vivaciousness. Friends described her as a bombshell who was always laughing and enjoyed life to the fullest. Recently, she embarked on a new venture by starting a party planning business with friends, showcasing her creativity and enthusiasm for social gatherings. On the evening of September 29th, Paula returned from a long day of flights and stopped at Walgreens. Surveillance footage actually captured her purchasing a bottle of extra-strength Tylenol on the CCTV. Unbeknownst to her, this seemingly harmful purchase would lead to her untimely death. After arriving home, she took at least 1 capsule from the newly bought bottle before being found lifeless 2 days later by her sister, Carol. That's right. She collapsed and died, and her sister was the one who raised awareness about her whereabouts because she was supposed to meet up with her sister Carol for like a lunch or dinner reservation, plans that they had made prior to everything that happened. And when she didn't see her sister, she informed authorities and went looking for her sister herself. She was found 2 days later after initially dying from the cyanide poisoning. The discovery of Paula's body marked a grim milestone in the Tylenol murders. Detectives found the Tylenol bottle on her bathroom vanity alongside a receipt from Walgreens, confirming that she had unwittingly consumed the contaminated product. The tragic event not only highlighted the dangers lurking in everyday products, but also sparked widespread fear and concern among the public. The aftermath of these events led to significant changes in pharmaceutical packaging regulations. The Chicago City Council responded by passing an ordinance requiring tamper-resistant packaging for medications, ensuring that consumers could easily identify if products had been compromised before the purchase. Paula Prince's legacy continues to resonate as a reminder of the importance of safety in consumer products and the need for vigilance against potential threats. This requirement also allows consumers to easily identify if a product has been tampered with or opened prior to purchase, thereby implementing preventative measures to avoid similar incidents in the future. You guys have seen this with makeup. You see it on concealers, on foundations, on packaged powder compacts, everything. The food service industry, everything in between. I mean, when you go to the store, you nowadays, I wish I had an example, you see the labels. At least when I worked in the deli department at Vaughn's, when we did production, we were taught and trained to put the sticker not only in a visible place so customers could see the date, how much it costed, what was in it, etc., but also we would use the tape to keep the packaging sealed. So however we placed it on the subs or like clear plastic containers when packaging like wings or tenders or things like that, we would use it to anchor the packaging closed and to show that it was sealed after we put the sticker on, and that since packaging it and putting on the shelf, no one has messed with it, and therefore if a customer goes to grab it when shopping and it is messed with and tampered with, they know it's obviously not coming from the department, that someone within the store was messing with it, tampering with it, whether it was opening it up. And I don't know, sometimes we see this, people open up packaged items to take a look at it for whatever reason, touch it, fuck with it, put it back. I mean, again, I see that within makeup stores. You go to CVS, in fact, Walgreens, Target, what have you, I always need an item like a concealer, and I go to that said concealer, that said brand, I'm in the section, I'm looking for one, that's my shade, I find one. The first, second, third one is usually fucked with, and you can tell by the way the sticker looks. If it's nice, pristine, smooth, still intact, that item hasn't been messed with, right? But if those weren't there, do you know how many test products you probably would have taken home? And I mean test products as in products that have been grabbed off the shelf, opened, looked at, swapped. Maybe if it's a lipstick, it's touched someone else's mouth. They tried it on at the store, put it back on the shelf. Really crazy to think about. On October 5th, Johnson & Johnson issued a nationwide recall of Tylenol products totaling 31 million bottles to prevent further deaths and ensure public safety. Although the situation was uncertain at the time, it was unimaginable that a corporation as significant as Johnson & Johnson would jeopardize its reputation by harming its consumers. Such an act would be illogical. It could easily be traced back to their laboratories, leading to potential arrests and, most critically, business failure. The individuals at the helm of the company were not to blame. Johnson & Johnson's commitment to recalling Tylenol products nationwide and cooperating with the investigation has become a historical benchmark, serving as a crucial lesson for current business leaders on managing crises effectively. And that's true. Entrepreneurs, people studying PR, the fact that despite the events that transpired are like 42 years old, this entire situation, Johnson & Johnson, as you guys may already know, unless you live under a rock, remains a well-known brand to this day, despite this happening, and widely available in various facilities still and businesses today. The company not only survived this crisis, but also thrived due to the proactive measures it undertook in response to the situation. It was said that Johnson & Johnson also put out, I believe, $100,000 kind of like ransom or reward if anybody knew anything in regards to the murders and who may be responsible for the killings. I don't know. I just think that the owners of the company at the time, I'm not sure if it's still the same people, they were just really, really good people. You know, one of them said he wasn't thinking about how the situation was going to affect him or the company, but more so how they could affect the situation if they were to step up and reach out and make it known that authorities and that the families of the victims had their full support. After October 5th in 1982, all 7 victims had passed and their cause of death had ultimately been confirmed: death by cyanide poisoning. Authorities, of course, felt the pressure from the public, the media, and relatives related to the victims to find the perpetrator the person responsible for causing all this in the first place. This is where it all begins to end. No one was ever caught for this crime. It turned into a cold case really quickly, really fast, to the point that a lot of things had to be dismissed. Like, for example, one primary suspect that they're still kind of stuck on to this day, and I'll get into why I say that in a bit, is James Lewis. James Lewis was a disgruntled man, in my opinion, and I'm just going to give you guys the facts, who wrote a letter to the police demanding $1 million, and I quote, in order for the murders to stop, is what he claimed. So he kind of made himself a suspect and put himself on the radar after sending that letter. Police had traced it back to him and realized before confronting him that the checking account he had put on the letter demanding $1 million in order for the murders to cease belonged to an entirely different man that James had a personal vendetta against. And he was trying to frame this man as the perpetrator in order to get him to be arrested and serve jail time. However, the man was not the perpetrator, and James Lewis was quickly dismissed as not the perpetrator, but just as some man was not thinking clearly. James Lewis has a bit of a history himself. I mean, the guy is suspected because of the letter. I think it's just one of those things where it's like, I think in the heat of the moment, he was thinking about doing something like that. He committed to it, followed through, and now it's a decision that's going to follow him and haunt him for the rest of his life, because now, even today, he's still being dragged around as the main suspect and possibly the man who committed this crime, even though there's really no concrete evidence other than this extortion letter to Johnson & Johnson. Here's some keynotes I made about him, and forgive me, I'm gonna have to kind of read these. So he had no direct employment relationship with Johnson & Johnson, so there was literally like no indication that he was ever directly employed by them in any way, so it wasn't just like a disgruntled employee at that. This other note is that it was like a potential personal grievance. The Chicago Tribune investigation revealed that Lewis's 5-year-old daughter, Toni, died in 1974 after sutures used to fix her congenital heart defect tore. These sutures were made by Ethicon, a subsidiary of Johnson & Johnson. So that kind of leads into like a revenge theory a little bit, where investigators believe that Lewis may have tampered with the Tylenol in an act of revenge against Johnson & Johnson due to his daughter's death. And then there was the extortion attempt with the letter. So Lewis sent a letter to Johnson & Johnson demanding $1 million to stop the killing shortly after the Tylenol murders occurred. Now, keep in mind that was when police and, other people like in their press conferences were asking for people to come forward if they had any information, right? So tip lines, things like that were popping off. But this one stood out because he specifically was saying that if I get $1 million, I'll stop the killing. So that spoke out louder than anything else, right? There's a difference between like, oh, my neighbor's been acting suspicious for the past 3 days, check them out, versus I'll stop the killings if you give me $1 million right now. Which one are you going to look into, right? That makes sense. But then there was the denial of his involvement, right? The minute, again, James Lewis is found and confronted by the authorities, he immediately starts backtracking. Despite being the prime suspect for decades, Lewis consistently denied any direct involvement in the poisoning. Prison time. So Lewis served about 13 years in federal prison for the extortion letter. Some people say 20 years. I'm not sure what the exact number is on that, but the man, he served a hefty amount of years in jail for that letter. And I mean, rightfully so. I mean, just because despite his daughter's death and everything else in between, if you didn't actually commit the murders, why would you write in the letter? I get it. Your daughter passed away. We're upset with Johnson & Johnson. Sue them directly. I feel like you could have a case in that potentially because their product failed. And if not, I can't really speak on the death of a loved one or a child, but it's like that doesn't give you the right to do what you did. Given the way Johnson & Johnson was responding, given how serious the situation was, him doing this, honestly, is such a fucking dick move. I mean, some people who have interviewed him go on to say he's a narcissist, he's not to be trusted, that even though he had no involvement in the poisonings, that letter really spoke a lot of truth to his character. That's what some professionals in journalism and authorities, even detectives, have been saying about him. I'm looking at this objectively, but what do you guys think? Isn't that a little bit odd behavior? I mean, your daughter died from the failure of her sutures for her heart condition. You're pissed at the company. You know, why not take it into legal matters with a lawyer? Why would you sit down and take the time to write a letter and send it to the company? Maybe he didn't think they would take it seriously or take it to the police, but given that the company prior to him sending that letter had announced that they're in support of the investigation and the family and the victims, and that they're compliant with the investigation, meaning anything that comes their way or anything that the police need, the authorities need, they're going to provide it without any issue, hesitation, or without any resistance. So why would you send that and think the complete opposite, that they're not going to give two fucks? I don't understand. Like there's 7 people in question here that have died. There's 7 people here who have experienced brutal deaths, and that's what you're going to do. I don't think you're doing any justice to your daughter. Let's just put it that way. I really don't. I don't think you're doing any justice to your daughter's death. So yeah, he's kind of ruled out as someone who was just related to the series of events due to a personal tragedy involving, again, his daughter. That's that. Even to this day, he's considered a suspect, but again, there is nothing concrete ruling it out. And that's what takes me to the next part here that I really want to get into with you guys, is theories and everything related. The first thing I want to start with is, why would anyone do this? And again, I'm reading my notes because I don't want to miss a damn thing, because I really went into this, so please forgive me, but I really just want everything to be a part of the conversations. Why would anyone do this? On a psychological level, one is where the perpetrator gains satisfaction over sadistic acts to random people of the public versus personal vendettas. Professionals also believe that the random acts of violence shows lack of empathy, revealing a psychopath no different from serial killers. Another thing too is like, why didn't this person get caught? Cameras, surveillance, security, witnesses. Did I mention this was the 80s, in the sense that this was still a time where people really did not worry too much about safety, boundaries, precautions, things of that sort. Okay, let me break it down for you. Please try to keep up with me. Back then, security cameras, footage, CCTV, whatever the fuck you want to call it, existed at the time. It had been created, I think, around like 1949, the 1940s, something like that, but surveillance had been around. It's just that in this time in the 80s, people didn't, again, think it was necessary, didn't find it necessary. And it was one of those things where this just happened and now we should look into cameras type shit. You know what I mean? Our store just got ransacked. Now we should probably talk to that guy, Mark, who was soliciting security camera footage, security cameras earlier today, about setting that shit up. I don't know. This kind of irritates the fuck out of me, because I get it, to each their own. Walgreens specifically, I want to talk about the store. I get it. You have different chains of command. It could be a franchise. It could be a separately owned, operated Walgreens. It's up to the owner and on the owner if they choose to put surveillance or security footage within or outside of their facility anywhere, right? It's like Walgreens were pretty massive stores, just like they are today. Some of them are like mediocre, maybe smaller now, but back then they were big. You have a lot of ground to cover, therefore a lot of product to monitor and keep track of. Wouldn't you install security cameras and or footage or some sort of surveillance system so that things can be kept an eye on? In either case, the perpetrator here, the murderer, the individual who contaminated the Tylenol capsules, preyed on this and hit specific stores that lacked security camera footage or surveillance within the facility or business, if you will. They benefited from this. They walked into specific stores, scouted them, realized they didn't have cameras, and thought, perfect. Either the day of or the next time, or when they plan to do this initially, they know now that they can go back to that store and not have any consequences in regards to their identity being found on the footage. Because do you know how easy it would have been for someone to sit there for an hour, maybe 2 hours, maybe 3, maybe 4, maybe 5? It wouldn't matter, because it definitely would have been within a day that this murderer would have been found if they were able to just go through security footage and see if they find anyone of the same person in the same place on different footage, right? You get what I'm saying? Nowadays, dude, everything has fucking cameras. Everything has cameras. People have cameras in their car for collisions, accidents, insurance. On your phones, people have cameras in their apartment complexes, in parking lots, even construction sites have portable cameras. Those like big white boxes with like the black stem. I'll put a picture because I'm bad at describing, but they blink blue lights. I always thought those were just setup lights, like temporary lights for the parking lot. Some of them actually have audio recordings and will speak out loud. It depends on the person that purchased them or is renting them, but some of them speak out loud and say, this location or this parking lot or this 7-Eleven or this store is being actively monitored for your safety. Like, it'll say it out loud. Everything has cameras. Nobody's chancing shit. And again, that goes to show how, yeah, on the spectrum, a bit of it was people being naive. Again, this was a time where people left their fucking like screen doors open, doors unlocked, neighbors pop in. Hey, can I borrow an egg? No bother. This was when kids would go playing until fucking dusk and would come back at any time for dinner with their parents. Like, and that just goes hand in hand with the fact that we're just witnessing things change from one mentality to another in society. Because think about it. Because people were so used to having their kids go play with the neighbors out late, they never questioned when Timmy didn't come home because Timmy got snatched and he was found dead in the woods 2 days later. You know what I'm saying? And that's why also kidnappers and, guys with candy and vans would get away with this shit, is because they didn't think to teach their children stranger danger, because it was such a trusting time in society and in some communities. Now, as time has evolved, we know how people are. So yes, construction sites have fucking portable cameras. The faith in humanity was quickly lost for many reasons, very valid reasons, but it was not the same. And this situation was one of those situations that again showed mankind, showed people like, hey, we can't trust that shit hasn't been tampered with. So add fucking seals to your shit. Like, you want your stuff on our shelves? Put tamper-proof seals on your shit, and then we'll talk. Another thing I want to discuss and like consider it as like a theory, and just also discussing like how this might have happened theoretically, because again, this is all what I'm discussing is alleged, it's not concrete, it's just brainstorming out loud with you guys given the details of the situation. Who would have access to concentrated amounts of cyanide back then in the 80s? And this is really what gets me, and maybe it might get you too. And again, I have to read my notes. Jobs and positions such as laboratory technicians, chemists, medical professionals, industrial workers, specifically in the mining and mineral field, and criminal elements such as the black market, right? Five corners would have access to cyanide. Of course, it's a far stretch to think that a miner would go out of their way to gain the resources to get cyanide and have it on hand. And then, same with doctors, right? People, medical professionals, people in the medical field, it's really hard to believe that they would do such a thing, because it could easily be traced back to them. It's another thing when you work at a specific clinic or hospital and you poison someone while they're admitted to the hospital in a room. You know what I mean? That is easily traced back. Of course, it's a far stretch to think that those two would do it, but I don't know. Laboratory technicians, chemists, I'm kind of leaning more to that side. The reason why is because especially in the 80s, it was very easy for those two main positions to get their hands on cyanide. It's crazy. They literally called it the Tylenol bill. So the Tylenol bill refers to legislation passed in response to the 1982 Tylenol poisoning murders. Here are the key details. Official name. The bill is officially known as the Federal Anti-Tampering Act. Okay, I thought they actually called it the Tylenol bill. It was passed by Congress in 1983, shortly after the Tylenol murders. The bill made it a federal offense to tamper with consumer products. It specifically criminalized tampering with food, drugs, medical devices, and cosmetics. Boom, there you go. There you go. The act imposed severe penalties for product tampering, including potential prison sentences. This legislation led to the widespread adoption of tamper-evident packaging in the pharmaceutical and food industries. In addition to the legal requirements, companies like Johnson & Johnson voluntarily introduced new safety measures such as triple sealed containers for Tylenol. I think the triple sealed is basically when you have to, I think it's like this, isn't it? Where it's like you have to like push down and turn to open. I don't think you guys can see that, but it went from having seals to and I think it was also like implemented for children too. So children couldn't just open shit or accidentally pop off a lid. Like, there's no way you're going to drop this and it's going to come falling off. You have to push down and twist it. It's a very distinct maneuver in order for the lid to remove itself, right? Yeah, it's crazy, dude. It's crazy. Like, that even evolved like to, and that's, examples of this being like a federal offense, like that's real. You know, like when Ariana Grande, I know this was a long time ago and in the beginning of her career, and she apologized, she took it back, she still stands by it to this day, her the offense she had caused. But you guys remember that video where she went to the donut shop with some guy and she like licked a donut over the counter and didn't even buy it? She was completely prepared to leave it behind, and I think she even did. Like, I think she left that store and that donut was still on that shelf and ended up being sold to someone else of the public. It's a federal offense. It's literally called the Federal Anti-Tampering Act. Anyways, you guys, that's all I have for you today. I don't even know what to say about this. Like, it still baffles me. It blows my mind, and I'm not sure why. I think what it is that I know this was 42 years ago. I know that the victims are long gone. They've passed away from such a tragic death. But I just feel so fucking gross knowing that, like, genuinely knowing that, personally speaking, something that I really didn't take a second thought to or really think on or consider and just take for granted, and is just such a way of life, is the tamper resistant sealings on not only just, again, medication. You see it with condiments, ketchup, if you like barbecue, ranch, cup of noodles, things like that. I know that they're supposed to have lids, honey, vitamins, anything really that you've seen a seal, right? And I don't know about you guys too, but like, the skit I'm going to make for this video is so true. Like, I honestly find those tamperment seals, the seals on those items, so fucking annoying. Like, I'll go straight to a bottle of ketchup and be so ready to get that ketchup on my plate that I'll go to pour it and realize it's not dispensing because I didn't remove the seal. And with a groan and with a sigh and with an eye roll, I, close the lid back up, take it off, remove the seal, put the lid back on, and then get my ketchup. And this has humbled me. I will forever be thinking about the opportunity we have today in order to identify if our product has been tampered with or not, which could prevent so many things, including preserving our life. That I will think about these victims each time, genuinely, because it's so crazy that for all my life up until this point, I really took that shit for granted. And I didn't realize where it had evolved from, where it come from. I just always thought, oh, safety regulations for public health and safety. Yeah, that sounds about right for the FDA, right? Like, this is what the FDA does. They've always been so on top of it that I've always just grown up knowing that everything has a protective seal on it, only to learn that the FDA is not always on top of it, that it didn't come from them. It came from these people passing away. It came from some fucking sadistic piece of shit deciding that he's going to fulfill capsules with cyanide just for his own fucking sadistic pleasure. It's sadism at its finest. It just sucks. It just sucks to know. It's just, oh man, it's just crazy. I try to stick with the positive and circle back to the fact that after this did happen, all parties involved did their absolute best to ensure that great practices were set forth moving forward into the future. Like, again, I have to kind of eyeball my notes here, but I did want to mention that Johnson & Johnson worked with the FDA to introduce new tamper-proof packaging because, again, they were the first ones in the lead within their market. So it really helped that they were taking stride with these changes. The FDA also in 1989 established federal guidelines requiring manufacturers to make all over-the-counter products tamper-proof, meaning it was absolutely mandatory. There was no question about it. If you were making a product, it needed that shit. It was required. The FDA also supported the passage of the Tylenol bill in 1983, which made it a federal offense to tamper with consumer products. So they seconded that motion and really assisted in also officializing that. FDA officials like spokesperson Bill Grigg worked to communicate with the public about the safety of over-the-counter medications during the crisis, basically ensuring people that this was just a rarity and that they could resume using their over-the-counter medication with peace of mind, especially with the tamper-proof packaging in place. And lastly, the FDA assisted in the investigation, including testing samples to help determine the source of the contamination. That's another thing, if I may have forgotten to add, is that people believed it could have been a pharmacist at the pharmacies working in store. And I personally, I don't know, I could kind of see that too, because they said that the cyanide or the dosage of cyanide in the Tylenol capsules was so great that it could actually dissolve the capsules and the bottle container itself. So the fact that nothing had deteriorated in the time that they were confiscated by police, the Tylenol bottles specifically, goes to show that someone within, I think, 48 hours had injected the cyanide in the capsules, packaged the bottle back up, and put it back on the shelf for the potential victims. It means that they had to be quick, undetected, and some people believe that they most likely injected the capsules there in the aisle at the store, or I did it prior and then walked in and put it on the shelf. As we know, ultimately, they ended up tampering them, putting them back on the shelf, but I'm always curious about those things, and I just feel like there would have been other ways that they could have defined the perpetrator. I don't know. What do you guys think? Tell me your thoughts below in the comment section. Don't really know what to think of this crime. I think that whoever did commit it was obviously a professional. I think it was very calculated ahead of time. Again, scanning the stores, making sure there was no cameras. But there's just still so many unanswered questions. And again, this was during a time where police really didn't give a shit. And not all, sure, but just enough, even at this time, just says a lot. Thank you guys so much for watching and joining me today. If you enjoyed the video, please make sure to like and subscribe on your way out. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Stay tuned for new videos every week. I'll be hitting you guys up with another video. And just let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. Thank you guys. I appreciate you. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.